The following story is fan-made and not to be considered part of the Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire canon. It is a hot day in Meereen and Daario Naharis is talking to one of his lieutenants. "Sir, there must be negotiation. We cannot defeat their combined army." "No, I will not negotiate with these people. Grey Worm will come. He has to." In the 2 years since the fall of the Mad Queen, Essos has both changed yet stayed the same. The situation within most of the three cities has largely stayed the same. Of course, they were overjoyed when they heard of the Dragon Queen's demise, but there is a power struggle occurring not between city-states but between mercenary companies. Since the fall of the Golden Company, several other mercenary companies have rose to power to fill the void left behind. One is a very barbaric company called the Sons of the Night, and it is led by a Sarnori called Vantos, and the other major one is known as the Tattered Lions. This is made up of former Lannister soldiers and commanders who were still loyal to their queen Cersei and the memory of their true lord Tywin, and they adamantly refuse to serve the man responsible for their deaths, and they have sworn that one day they will return to Westeros to take their revenge. Far to the south in the island of Naf, things are far more interesting. Grey Worm, determined to keep his promise to his true love Missandei, arrived on the island of Naf with his unsullied army, determined to defend Naf against the pirates. But a few mere hours after the advanced parties made it ashore, they all started to become sick and die. This was due to the dreaded butterfly fever, but determined to keep his promise, Grey Worm instead declared that if he could not protect Naf, he would hunt down and destroy the pirates who were plaguing it. So he and his Unsullied set off for the Basilisk Isles, determined to rid it of the pirates. And after more than 3 months of bloody conquest, the Unsullied finally rid the Basilisk Isles of the pirates, freeing thousands of slaves in the process, many of whom agreed to stay with the Unsullied. Realizing that the Basilisk Isles were the perfect place to intercept slave ships and stop pirate raids, Grey Worm decided to stay there, and the Unsullied, along with many of the freed slaves, stayed with him. So they got to work rebuilding the ancient Valyrian city of Gorgossos. Once it had been rebuilt in a far more defendable place, Grey Worm renamed it to the city of Daenerys after his fallen queen. He then renamed the Basilisk Isles the Dragon Isles, and ruled over them as Lord Protector alongside a council of Unsullied and free people. Now to the north, the drums of war are sounding. After the news of the Breaker of Chains' death had reached the Bay of Dragons, the wise masters of Yunkai, with the help of Volantis, retook their city and re-enslaved the people living there. They then sent agitators into the cities of Meereen and Astapor, determined to foment unrest. Daario Naharis, who had fallen into a deep depression after the news of his beloved reached him, was spurred into action by these events. Believing that the council elected to rule the city was too weak, so he overthrew it, declaring himself governor militant and vowing that Meereen would never be a slave city again. To the south, in the city of Astapor, the butcher named Cleon had retaken his throne. Cleon, although a brutal ruler, was a former slave himself and therefore hated the masters, and he swore that he would never be put in chains again. Now, although their leaders don't exactly see eye to eye, the cities of Meereen and Astapor have begrudgingly formed an alliance against the triple alliance of Volantis, Yunkai and New Gis. Knowing that they are outmatched, Daario has sent word to Grey Worm, begging him for help. We must now wait to see what Grey Worm's response is. In the years since the visit of the Mother of Dragons to their fair city, Karth has changed quite a bit. The fall of the Council of 13 left a power vacuum within the Kartheri elite, one which many tried to fill by initiating a sort of shadow war against each other. This shadow war lasted for nearly 2 years, and saw large amounts of assassination, sabotage and open fighting between the nobility and merchants of Karth in order to try and claim power for themselves. Fed up by this, several commanders of the city's garrison initiated a coup, overthrowing the merchants and nobility and placing many under arrest. They would then assume power under a military dictatorship. Under this dictatorship, Karth would not fare very well. With those responsible for the city's wealth either imprisoned or dead, the Kartheri economy plummeted, and the people blamed the dictatorship. Now, Karth was a city of philosophers, and one philosophy that had gained much popularity was the philosophy of Jun Sacra, or the people are sacred. It was preached by an old philosopher called Jura. It was a radical ideology that wanted to do away with what it considered the old ways of the ruling elite. It even claimed that the so-called republics of the world were nothing more than oligarchies, and replace it with a system where everyone was equal and everyone was responsible for their own actions. In his words, he wanted to create a world where everyone was a king or queen of their own realm. Now in most places this kind of ideology wouldn't gain much traction, but in Kaf it did. An example that Ajira would give was to build a pile of stones, making sure that the stone on the bottom was very large and the stone on top was very small. He would then put a gold coin on top, saying the gold coin represented the ruling elite and the large stone at the bottom represented the people. He would then remove the large stone from the bottom, thus the whole structure would fall apart. He also claimed that the same could happen in reality, the people just had to learn their own strength. This ideology quickly spread throughout the city, and the more and more the dictatorship tried to silence it, the more and more louder it got, until it successfulully overthrew the dictatorship, and thus the Kaf Free State was born. But this would not last for very long. The Free State was unable to unite the people as it wanted to, and infighting among the hierarchy meant the Free State was doomed to failure, and only a few months into its rule, a brutal mercenary called Zarton successfully united both the criminal element of the city and whatever was remaining of the military, and overthrew the Free State, declaring himself as emperor. And in an act of cruelty, instead of killing the Free State's leadership, he banished them to the Red Waste. But this would not be the last we would hear of them. He then got to work brutally rebuilding Kaf and its economy, and after he rebuilt Kaf, he would reveal his true intentions. Conscripting every man and woman of fighting age into the new imperial army, Zarton laid out his great plan to turn Kaf into an empire. Ever since the Dothraki left with their great Khaleesi, their sea has been largely barren. The so-called sheep people who had been tormented by the Dothraki for centuries have since spread out into their sea, with many small settlements appearing across this great sea. To the north of the Dothraki Sea, the Sarnori have started to reoccupy some of their fallen cities. The Sarnori wish to return their kingdom back to its former glory, but this is no easy task, as many Sarnori believe that their ruined cities are haunted. Further to the east, the Ibbenese have started to resettle ports along the coast as well. Some Dothraki refuse to go with the Great Khaleesi, but they are relatively few in numbers, and are not considered to be much of a threat anymore. However, out of the Red Waste, a new faction have emerged. The Jun Zakrans, exiled by the newly crowned Emperor of Kars for their radical ideology, which wanted to do away with the old ways of monarchy and oligarchy, and bring about a new world where everyone would be free and equal. The Emperor thought he was being cruel by exiling them, but he didn't realise just how strong they were. They banded together and survived the Red Waste, but their leader, Jura, was not so lucky. With their leader gone, factionalism started to form within the Sakrans as they left the Red Waste, eventually stumbling upon a ruined settlement. Within this settlement, two factions emerged, one which wished to stay closer to the original ideology. They wanted to achieve their goals through peaceful means, and wished for all people to have an equal say. The other faction was more militant, believing that this equality could only be achieved through bloodshed. They also believed that although everyone should be free, there had to be some sort of hierarchy, otherwise it would just fall into anarchy. Eventually things got so heated that both sides ended up by fighting each other, and the peaceful side was defeated and driven out of the settlement. They would head west towards the Bay of Dragons, determined to bring the ideology of Jun Sacra to all, with the other faction, now calling themselves the Sacramentum, headed north, determined to bring the Dothraki Sea under their banner. And as they headed north, they encountered settlements of the sheep people, and through one means or another they united them under the banner of the Sacramentum, until they reached the gates of Vase Dothrak, with their army considerably swollen. With no one there to defend it and only a small population left, the city fell without a fight, and it was renamed Vase Populus. From their seat of power, the Sacramentum now plan on extending their dominion across the whole of the Dothraki Sea. Thank you very much for watching. I'm having a lot of fun in making this series, and if you're having fun watching it, then don't forget to hit that like button to show me that I should continue this series. And if you enjoy this content and would like to see more of it in the future, then I have a very small request. Would you consider hitting that subscribe button? It would genuinely help me and the channel out. But until next time, may you spend a half hour in heaven before the devil knows you're dead.